We came out of there literally traumatized after 60 days.
Do people ever get intimate on that show? I mean, you're both naked. It's got to happen.
Yeah, what really gets under my nerves when someone's like not doing much. As terrible as it was, my only option is to try to like push forward.
Dan, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here with me. Most people will recognize you from being a five-time Naked and Afraid legend. You were the runner-up on season one of Last One Standing, and then you were the winner of season two, which just finished airing not too long ago.
Yeah.
You are a former Peace Corps volunteer. I believe you did 2 years in the Peace Corps, and your career is basically spent as a marine biologist.
Did your research.
I literally, Gabby told me, my assistant told me that she had gotten you to agree to come on the podcast, and I was so stoked. And I literally spent like from 8 o'clock last night to like 3 o'clock in the morning, just like binging everything and getting as much. There's not that much information actually about you out on the internet. But my first question for you, it has to be, what is the craziest thing you have ever seen while on Naked and Afraid?
Oh my God. Hard to question, ironically. It's all just so crazy that it all blurs together into one just like crazy fucking mess. Sorry, excuse my French. Um,
So you
I
can
mean,
curse.
every time you're out there, like part of the reason I love being out there is just because like every day you're doing something or you're in a situation where you're like, you can like look at yourself in the third person. And you're like, what decisions in my life led me to this moment to like getting here?
Like if you had to put a thumb tag on like what's the one craziest moment that really sticks out to you where you were like, oh my God, this is really crazy.
You didn't see it, but on like this last season of Last One Standing, there's a moment where like Fernando and I were hunting. They didn't have good cameras on it, so it didn't end up making the cut. We were hunting, and these two white rhinos showed up and started walking towards us. And we're just like standing there, you know, like famished and naked and stuff like that. And we're like, we started to like have to run back from these white rhinos. But well, we're like completely naked out in the middle of nowhere in Africa. And I'm like, yeah, it's just nuts. Um,
Right, you're literally standing in the middle of Africa naked, and there's white rhinos like
yeah,
wondering
yeah.
what's going
And
on.
like after the, talk about seeing myself in third person, wondering how I got there. Uh, at the end of the Amazon season, the XL I did, which is 60 days in a Peruvian Amazon,
Well, you were
by
supposed
far
to
the
do
most
40 days.
brutal challenge. Yeah. Yeah, I was supposed to do 48 and turn into 60. By far the most brutal challenge I've ever done. At the end of that, we had to go to extraction. We built this raft out of some logs and fishing line, essentially. It's like a Flintstone raft, and we paddled out. Again, after 60 days, I lost 60 pounds. It was just like completely famished. I had made like this extraction, like Tina Turner Thunderdome looking thing out of feathers
Yeah.
around me. We paddled out in the middle of the Amazon, and our extraction vehicle, quote unquote, was a giant vessel. It was the largest vessel in the Peruvian naval fleet. It was in the middle of the Amazon, and we had to like aim for the front of it, the bow, and there's like a little cutout high up top, and but the vessel was like maintaining its position in the Amazon, and the river's rushing around it, and we're in this little like handmade raft. I'm like, this is like super dangerous, actually, and we like paddled up, hit the front of the vessel. They dropped down, the naval guys like dropped down this little white rope, and we grabbed onto it, and we're trying to like hold this rope and hold our vessel together as it's like smashing against the side of this boat. And the Navy guys, like the cutout was like 10 feet above us. They like had to reach down really far and grab our wrists one by one and like pull us up. They like grabbed a couple people, and they grabbed my wrists, and I have like feathers all over me and like face paint, and I'm just crying. And they pulled my naked body up, just like smacked against the side of the black vessel in the sun. Like pulled my vessel up or my body up as I'm crying, and, like hauled me onto this boat. And I'm like, it's like one of the craziest experiences I've ever had. Like how in the world are you ever gonna have any kind of experience like that? That's the one that comes to mind though. It's just like bizarre.
It's definitely apparent from watching you on the shows, especially when you're getting into like the legends and the XL challenges, and then the last one standing, that you really handle yourself and handle the circumstance like with such grace. You never really boast about providing, which is something that I think is really admirable. You just whatever you're doing, you're never like waving a flag that you've done something or that you're contributing. You just contribute, and I think that that's like really important, not just to the group consciousness, but for you yourself, where you're not fixating on that. And also, you never seem to be judging anybody for no reason. You also seem to be in this really great positive headspace that I think is impossible to hang on to. Even when you're in circumstances and situations where like anybody would be like, this is unrealistic, like this is enough. You're just like trying to make a positive out of that. And I'm wondering where does that come from? Because it's so rare and so unique to find that in a person.
Sort of this like mental ability that I think I've developed, at least honed in throughout these challenges, that a lot of like the good survivalists or people who do good on making the afraid and can like be happy and last long end up having this as well. When you're out there on these challenges, you're having some of the worst experiences of your life. Again, you literally, I'm not exaggerating, you literally can feel like you're dying. You can be like covered in bugs, laying in the rain, near hypothermic, like not sure if you're going to be able to eat for another couple weeks or if you're just going to like get taken out with hypothermia the next
Uh,
day. There are medics there and they'll med tap you, but they med tap you when you have to go to the hospital. And you don't want to get to a situation that's that serious. You know what I mean? So it's still like extremely scary. It doesn't feel like that much of a safety net. But again, you just are in these very like dark, terrible places. And some people can be in those places. People are often in those spaces and they think of their family, they think of food, they think of their bed and all of these things. And it makes them just like, as you would imagine, so terribly homesick. Like they want those things so bad
they
and
go
it
down the
tears them
rabbit hole.
apart in the inside. Yeah, they go down a rabbit hole and like thinking of those things sort of like just makes it worse, makes everything worse. But for me, it doesn't. And this is what I'm talking about. For me and for many other the good survivalists, it doesn't. If you can like actually harness joy from those things, if you're out there having these terrible experiences and you think of your family and you think of food and your bed and all of the things you have at home, and if you can, instead of being homesick, if you can be grateful and appreciative and like excited for those things that you have those things in your life, it can almost like create joy. And if you're able to like sort of flip the script like that and like create joy by thinking of all these wonderful things and people that you have in your life and all the things you're going to eat when you get out, um, and that you're going to be able to eat ho-hos for the rest of your life, whatever it
Right,
is. If you
right.
can harness joy from that rather than like longing and pain, your like joy and appreciation for your life can almost increase in tandem with the terribleness of whatever situation you're in. If you can do
So,
that, it's a really like amazing mental trick.
so is that something that you kind of force yourself into, or is that something you've just naturally developed over the year? Because I don't want to get too deep into your personal story, but you spoke a lot about loss in your life and all of the things
Yeah.
that you suffered as a young person. And even with all of that trauma and all of the hardship you've endured in your life, to still be one of the most positive figures on reality TV, in my opinion, I've ever seen. It's just like it's like what a testament to
Thank
the
you.
kind of human being you are. Just like you really remind me of my cousin. That my cousin, he's always positive, even in the shittiest situations, and he's always got his name is also Dan too, which is interesting. But he's always positive and he's always happy. Like even if he's not, he still does it for other people around him. And I really feel like that same thing from you, which is like what a testament to, and one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk to you and get you on the podcast is because I really think you're such a special human being. And it can't be faked. It could be faked for a moment or two, but you portray that throughout every moment that they have you on the screen, which is just like I'm just wondering, is it organic or is it something that you've just like manufactured?
I don't know. I think it's organic. I mean, to be out there, like you have two choices. If not making it to the end for me isn't a choice, like mentally, I don't allow myself to like think that. I'm very stubborn. Um, Sometimes I don't know when to call it quits on things in my life, sometimes when I should.
Yeah.
That also applies to making afraid challenges. So I know I'm going to make it to the end, and then I have two choices. Am I going to like be out there and be miserable and sit in the mud the whole time, or am I going to like try to be positive and make something of it and just like figure things out and have fun? I don't know. I don't know if I taught myself that like trick about being positive or if it came organically or not. Maybe I just saw like being sad about things is not an option, so I at some point flipped the script. But I don't know. I think I really like in the Amazon. I realized I was doing that,
Yeah.
and it
No, it,
and it yeah, it really helped me get through. I mean, the Amazon was by far the hardest challenge I've done. We came out of there literally traumatized after 60 days. Again, I'm not using these words lightly. I mean, we're lost 60 pounds. We were covered in bugs for 60 days straight and just wet and muddy and isolated. And it was a lot. I didn't move out of that single spot I was in for 60 days, at least for sleeping. Yeah, like I said, you learn a lot about yourself on these challenges and the good and the bad and what you're capable of, the things you're capable of. I mean, like I started this like I did that fan challenge. I sort of like applied or started talking to the casting people on a whim, like
yeah.
without thinking anything of it. Like I absolutely never would have thought I was capable of any of this. I never thought it would get to this point, especially after doing five challenges and winning the last one, which still even sounds crazy to say.
I mean, really rare personality type that you have. Again, I don't know you personally, but from what I've seen and being what I would consider a decent judge of character, it seems that this is authentic. What's coming from you, your ability to handle stress and manage stress in other people's situations, not even things that have to do with you. I mean, it's really something that I think people should really watch your episodes and look at how you handle these extremely stressful situations and torturous situations to some degree and are able to handle that with such grace. I think it's if people had that kind of mentality and were able to lock themselves into that mentality, I think we'd see a lot less depression, anxiety, and all of the horrible things that people, psychological traumas that people really
Yeah.
dig themselves deep into. And it's just a simple trick that they could learn just from watching you in those really hard situations, which is just turning your head away from the horridness of it and just finding that little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, which is a really, really hard thing to do and a rare thing you see. So kudos to you for being so positive. Because I mean, even me with the small social media influence that I have and people being negative around you, it's really hard for you not to go in that direction and to still stay your authentic self. What compelled you to go on Naked and Afraid? I feel like that's not something that like a lot of people are signing up for. I feel like also there's a lot of body shaming and people very afraid of exposing themselves to being naked. And I think that it takes a certain level of confidence and freedom in order to go and put yourself on national TV, butt naked, completely vulnerable.
It was kind of, well, I shouldn't say an accident, but like I didn't put much forethought into it, I'll say. I had seen a couple episodes and it looked interesting. And then I was at work, what was it like 6 or 7 years ago, and had a small break. I'm sitting at my computer and I opened up Facebook and I saw a post from some random person I know. Um, and they'd gotten a message from a casting person for Naked and Afraid. Said, if you or anyone you know wants more information on being on Naked and Afraid, send us an email. He pasted that, put it on his Facebook. I thought it was interesting. I literally thought nothing of it. I clicked it, my email popped up, and I wrote like three sentences and sent it. And they ended up calling me an hour later out of the blue. And I had an impromptu hour and a half long interview during my work day. And I got off the call and I was like, that was weird. Okay. And then they called me the next day. I had another interview. And then they set up another third interview for a few days later. And at that point, I was like, I need to actually start thinking of this, thinking about this and like what it's about and watching the episodes. I don't know what compelled me to think it was a good idea. At that point, I mean, I had some skills. I think everyone who spends time in the outdoors has more survival skills than they give themselves credit for. Um, And I learned that as I started, like researching and trading and all of that. I don't know. I was just sort of like an outdoorsman at the time and had never thought of being on TV or anything like that. The naked thing didn't really bother me. I totally comfortably being naked, especially living on Big Island. I live walking distance from a big nude beach. So that didn't bother me. But the whole experience just seemed crazy to be like out in the wilderness, totally depending on yourself. Of course, there's a whole TV aspect to it as well. But I've always sort of migrated towards those like weird, extreme, uncomfortable experiences that test your limits a little bit. No matter what, you come out of those experiences learning more about yourself, whether it being things you like or don't like, or what you're capable of. And uh, that was definitely the case for Naked and Afraid. I didn't expect it to balloon into like the first time I did it. I talked to work. I was like, it's a once in a lifetime experience. That
Yeah, here
that
you are.
ex that excuse kind of faded after the third or fourth time. But
What was it like the first time you had to actually strip down naked and walk into season 10, which you did a 14-day fan challenge, right?
yeah,
Which actually, from watching that 14-day fan challenge, and for anybody who doesn't know, it's actually season 10, episode 13, which is not easy to find on the internet. So everyone is welcome for that. It was in Montebello, Mexico, and it was with Holly. And I'm wondering, like, what, because like you said, you're not uncomfortable being naked, but to get like just to strip down naked and start walking into the woods, that's
yeah.
crazy, you know?
It's nuts. It's nuts. And, like a lot of people who haven't seen the show think there's some sort of like sexual aspect to it with the naked thing, and they're really like, is it? I don't know. Maybe there's some like wow factor for like get people hooked on the show, but there's really not like a sexual thing when you're out there. And but it adds the naked thing does add so many additional elements to the experience. You don't realize how much clothing that just like little layer of protection helps you. When you don't have that, you're completely exposed to the cold and the bugs and the insects and the elements and the vegetation, like everything. Um, and you have to just rely on your skills. I'd almost say twice as much. Like you just don't have any sort of protection. You have to rely on your skills to get the bugs away, to keep yourself warm, to give yourself shelter. All those things that your clothes provide a lot more than you give them credit for. No, if you've ever spent extensive time in the outdoors, when you're like out camping for long periods of time, you become so much more in tune with the weather patterns and the shifts in wind and what the animals are doing and the cycles of the moon and that kind of thing. When you're out there on these challenges, one, because you're naked, and two, because you don't have like a phone or anything telling you the weather or what's coming, or you're not able to like look up any information. It's like that sort of feeling on steroids. You become wildly in tune with the environment you're around. Like everything you're looking at, every plant, if you're a good survivalist anyway, like every plant, every potential food source, every potential like source of shelter, you're sort of just surveying everything around you constantly, 24/7 as you're moving around. And yeah, you just become extremely in tune with your environment. And I think like the nudity aspect really adds to that and adds to it adds to what you have to do. It adds to
It
the need
skyrockets
for
awareness.
skill to sort of protect yourself.
Uh, I I feel a lot of the contestants, especially on the first day, right? The first day has got to be so important on this show, and I feel like what you see is a lot of contestants attack the first day haphazardly. Now, again, I could also be a couch warrior over here saying these things, so I'm hoping you can correct me if I'm wrong. So for me, and especially for real, thinking about going on the show myself in the past, um, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, so uh, most people are doing what's best in the early stages. Like, what's best for me right now, this moment right now. I'm thirsty right now. Let's find water. I'm cold right now. Right. So you're reacting to the initial things that are coming up and not really planning and strategizing on how do I handle this, not just day one, but what does day 21 look like, especially if you're in the headset of I'm going to get to day 21. And so what we wind up seeing is that people first, one of the things that I think is crazy is people start looking for water for hours, right? So we see people looking for water for way too long or starting to build shelter that's never going to get built in even 3 or 4 or 5 days. They start that challenge. And I feel like Number one, the thing that you really don't see on this show, and something that I think you did very, very well, is you built a healthy communication with your partners from the beginning. And I feel like that's something that doesn't really happen. So first you run into this awkward situation where you're butt naked and here's a stranger, and I don't know how the dialogue really starts from there, but you seem to do a really great job, even coming in initially for the hug, right? Like you, as soon as you saw your partners, you initially you come in, you obviously ass out, uh, hug, and you kind of remove the layer of the awkwardness right there through, I think, bodily contact, which I think is something people should really learn from. But not only that, after you build that communication, that initial communication, which I think is absolutely necessary, because who's going to be the dominating force here? Who's taking the lead? Who knows what? Who doesn't know what? And then one of the things that actually stopped me from moving myself on going on to the show was that if they put me with somebody who is going to be unrealistic and obnoxious, I'm going to tap immediately. I'm not going to spend 21 days with somebody who is unreasonable. And you've seen that on
Yeah.
the show where some partners are just like overly sensitive, they're obnoxious, they're entitled. But anyway, and here's my narrative and how I feel like you should go into this, and tell me if I'm wrong. Pick me apart. I feel like first thing you need to do is find your camp. First things first, you need to find a reasonable camp. It doesn't have to be the permanent camp, but it needs to be a camp, and you have to establish that camp. After you establish your camp, uh, firewood. You need to get firewood, and then you need to make a fire. You need to get off the ground, and if you have a mosquito net, that's like big. Mosquito net for me, I think, is big. I wonder why a lot less people don't bring mosquito nets, and I'm wondering if you can give us insight because it's a question I always have.
It's
Why
a
not
great
bring a
item.
mosquito net? And I feel like water on day one should be the last priority. Like if you have time, then you look for water. How am I sounding?
Um, Close. I would definitely move water way up the priority list. You need water. Um,
But if
but
you don't have a
but
fire,
good.
again, if you don't have a fire, you really can't do much with the water anyway. So you need to
True.
get and you can't build a fire without you can't build and sustain a fire without firewood. So like first and
So
foremost, shoot me.
it's definitely true in many situations, at least if you have the pot and you need to boil your water to purify it. There are other methods of purifying water, um, or determining if water is safe or not. Um, but the core four, you're pretty close. The core four for survival, shelter, water, fire, and to a lesser degree, food. Um, it's very hard to prioritize them on like what you do first. If you read any guide and it says you definitely do this first, then this, throw the guide away. It's totally situational. But what I always tell people is you need to like before you actually physically do anything, you need to have those in mind and make a mental checklist. You need to find a location where you can build shelter. You need to think of water, think of your methods of purifying water. Do you need to have fire or not? If you need to have fire, is there firewood nearby? Um, and to a lesser degree, if you have the ability, you can think of food sources nearby. That's a much lesser concern relative to the others. But again, you need to like find a location where you know you can get all of those needs met first and check them off in your head before you figure out what you're like physically actually going to do first. And what you're actually going to do first totally depends on the situation you're in. If you're like in the
Right,
desert, like I was, and
right.
say there's like a tree, and you're like, okay, I know I can sleep under here. The chances of like rain and hypothermia are really low. Um, I need to, and then you can like not worry about shelter for that minute, and you
Yeah.
can worry
It's
about purifying
situational.
water or like finding if you think there's a spring nearby, potentially you can go search for that. So it's totally situational. You just have to like sort of keep them all in your mind at once. But I want to go back to like to what you said in the beginning about people
Communication.
like being a little haphazard. Well, that too, but people being a little haphazard on the first day. Um, that's my biggest thing.
You think it's ego or like the need?
I
The camera's on me. I need to show.
um I think it's often more a little bit of just like panic of like not being in that situation before and you like need to get your needs met because ironically if you're planning for like multiple days rather than just like that moment, sometimes it means you're going to be in a worse situation that night. You have to like constantly think about positive feedback. So the worst thing positive and negative feedback loops. The worst thing you can do is like go on a challenge and sort of like panic a little bit and like try to build a shelter that's going to be like good enough for the night, and you spend so much energy doing it, but it's sort of like crap, and it's nothing you can like build off of. You have to like completely rebuild it the next day, and you've wasted a ton of energy. You have to like, especially with shelter building, people do that. They like freak out and try to make something good, and then they like get really tired, and then they have to like rebuild it all for days, and they've like lost all that energy, and they're sort of just like in a negative feedback loop that sometimes can like drain people down into oblivion. But sometimes what you have to do is like, yeah, go in it with a little bit of planning. Be like, okay, I'm gonna need like a bigger shelter. I'm gonna have to like spend the time building this giant thing, but I don't want to rebuild something. So like maybe I'm gonna have to like risk it and sleep in the mud for a night or two while I build this thing in order to just like save some energy. And sometimes you have to make those calculations. Sometimes it can like mean that you're gonna have like a much harder like first night or two, and that's a hard pill for people to swallow often. But like with my shelter in the Amazon, I should show you. I should send you a picture of the. I designed it all out like way before when I was sitting here at my house, what I wanted my shelter to look like, because I knew we were gonna have a group of three, and we were gonna be in like the jungle environment. It needs to be rainproof. We need to have also a shelter or a fire. So I designed that like if you saw the Amazon season, that pyramid
Yeah, I did see it.
with like the three raised beds around it inside and the fire, and then the opening, the door on the other side. I designed that at home, and I like literally this is my like nerdy science brain coming out, but I literally like sketched it all out and did the like with the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Like figure
That's
out like
awesome.
the exact length of like all the logs I was gonna need in order to have like a big enough shelter to have these beds and stuff in it. So I could like hit the ground running. I could get there and be like, okay, I know that I need four posts that are sturdy and that are like 16 of my feet lengths long, so I could like walk it and then cut it. And I
That's
knew
where
I
you.
could,
That's
but
where
to
you
go back to what I was
actually
saying,
you climbed up
yeah,
that big ass tree too.
yeah, to get it up. Yeah. And it worked, but it was a lot the first day to like establish those like four posts and stuff. But I knew I could build that, and then I could build like sort of like one of the sides as a lean-to and like sleep under that for a little bit.
Right.
And it wouldn't be great for the first couple nights, but I could keep building off of it and creating
Like day by
something, and
day.
it improving my situation day by day is key. You have to like think long term and not waste energy, and just think
Right.
how you can improve your situation day by day without like going haphazard and having to redo things and
Yeah.
all of that. It's very,
That was my thinking.
very important for survival.
Is
Yeah.
like you can see who's there to finish and who's there to just like survive the day one, day by day, and
Yeah.
you really in the Amazon especially people should really watch that. Again, I think that there's so much more to that show than just the gimmick of being
Oh
naked
yeah.
and out in the wilderness. There's so much
A
more.
lot more.
The psychological warfare that goes into that, and the planning and the patience and all of these things, really that's the game for me anyway. That's what I'm looking at, and I'm really seeing that as the major component in the game that you're playing, especially when you're dealing with alternate personalities. And one of the things that I just wanted to comment on, and again I keep going back to this mosquito net because I'm so the first challenge you did in Mexico on season 10, did they give you those three items or did you choose those items? Because they didn't say that you chose them. They just said the contestants have these three items, and I think it was a machete, a fire starter, and a mosquito net.
Oh yeah, those were ours.
You got to choose those.
Yeah. Yep.
So do you choose one? Holly chooses one, and then the third one's just like a here. You need this.
Yeah. So often, I don't know, it depends. Often we're not giving away too many production secrets. Often like the extra item they give you is like also in that case it was one of our items. A lot of times if they give you like a pot or a fire starter, sometimes it'll be like in addition to your items, it'll be like production will provide those. But in this case it was ours.
But but
It was
but will
Holly's
you
mosquito
know
net.
that? Like again, I know that.
No. You often don't know it until you
So what
walk
if
up.
you pick a fire starter and they gave you a fire starter? You just shit out of luck.
I can't really talk to how they
Right.
there's a way that they correct for that.
Okay. Right. Because you
That I can't
don't
really
think
talk to.
you're because you
Yeah,
never see
they make
someone
sure
who
that doesn't
chose the
happen.
same item. You never see
Exactly.
someone with two of the same items.
Otherwise, everyone would just come with two machetes. So you can tell there's a little bit of behind the scenes planning there. But
Yeah. But
yeah,
if you can, just 1 minute about the mosquito net.
sure.
Because it's something that I'm always thinking about there. Why are we not seeing mosquito nets? You can hunt with it, you can trap with it, you can fish with it, you can use it for so many things. Why are we not seeing the mosquito net as like that staple item?
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. I am completely on board with the mosquito net. I don't know the staple items though are irreplaceable. Like a pot in certain situations anyway when you can't purify water. Um, a fire starter and a blade, especially a blade. A blade is the most important. You need that for absolutely everything.
Yeah.
On top of that, you need fire for so many things like purifying water. So fire starter is extremely important. Even if you can do friction fire, there's so many environments where it's just not feasible. And then a pot. Those are the three staples. Beyond that, it sort of opens up into a lot of things. But at the top of my list of those like secondary items is definitely the fire or sorry, the mosquito net for exactly the reasons you said. You can use it for uh fishing and just like crafting all kinds of things and for warmth at night it's huge. Um
Yeah,
yeah,
it just seems to be
for a million different
such
things
a
in
valuable,
addition to just keeping
valuable item.
mosquitoes out.
But
It
it does
is.
obviously make sense. Like you need the machete, you need the knife, you
Yeah.
need the fire starter, and then if you it's like you said, secondaries. But you see people getting like murdered by like insects. Like it
Yeah.
happens, and it's like not even fat where someone's whole body is just covered head to toe. That is just so unreasonable. Like it really is just so unreasonable, and also kind of scary. Can't you really get seriously sick from that? Has that ever
Oh
happened to you?
yeah.
I
And
didn't
people
see you
do.
ever get. They never show you specifically covered in bites.
I I definitely got covered in bites. It was terrible. um,
Did I miss it?
literally like
Did they show it?
every probably. I don't know. They must have. Especially in the beginning. Your body sort of adapts to it a little bit later on, but especially in the beginning, like man, a square inch of my body would have like over a dozen mosquito bites or bug bites on it. You had in the Amazon, you had the mosquitoes that were out all day. You had these big blood-sucking, biting flies that would leave these big welts all over your body. Um,
It's torture.
it it was yeah, it was literal torture. Like again,
Yeah.
not using that
It,
word lightly. It was literal torture. You'd lay down at night. If you laid too close to the ground, there were these little, they didn't bite, but they were like these little like flea-like things that crawled all over your body, and you could just feel them all over your body. It was horrible. Um,
how
and
do you get
even
past
I remember Kayla and I in the Amazon, we tried to like we were like, we need to get away from these bugs. And we like looked at the water and we're like, we knew it was like filled with piranha and caiman and stuff. And we're
yeah,
like,
you
I
both
choose death. We're gonna do it. And we like got into the water and tried to sit in the water. And there were all these invertebrates and small fish in the water that would bite you just as bad, harder. And it was terrible. You couldn't like the only time you could like get away from the bugs was when you were like actively swimming underwater, which expels a lot of energy, and obviously you can't do that very often. Um, it was really bad. The only thing, and I figured this out by mistake. I didn't even think of it. I admit. The only thing that gave us any reprieve from the bugs was after. Fortunately, Kayla and Jamie didn't experience this because they tapped too early. But after day like 6 or 7, because there's a lot of chaos. It took me a long time to get that shelter built. The one I was talking about, that
yeah, yeah.
pyramid.
Hmm.
I started to like really get it fortified and rainproof and nice. And if you went to my raised bed in the back of the shelter, it was dark in the back of the shelter, and the bugs didn't fly in the dark. So I sat in that raised bed in the back. The bugs wouldn't fly in and get me. If I went out, they would. But
How do you,
eventually, I had that sort of escape. Until that, it was 24/7 all over you.
so I guess my question is how people have a difficult time when their Wi-Fi is not working for 5 minutes. People have a difficult time when the store that they don't have the food that they want and they lose their freaking minds. How is it that you wake up on day two after getting eaten alive through day one and say, okay, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to keep like what is going on psychologically for you to get yourself there? Because I feel like less than 1% of human beings have the fortitude to say, okay, I'm going to keep going.
You just have to have like a paradigm shift in your situation. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes when the Wi-Fi goes out for 5 minutes, I'm like, damn it, what are we
Yeah,
gonna do now?
yeah, but
Like I'm right in that boat. Um, I
me
won't lie.
too. I'm just saying
But
it's like in juxtaposition.
but yeah, you just have to sort of like have a paradigm shift in your reality and your situation, and I don't know, just sort of accept it for what it is. I don't really know like the trick or the secret to like doing that. Because yeah, sometimes it's I see people that can't really shift their I hope I'm articulating this right. I see many people who can't like shift their baseline in different situations.
Right.
Um,
They
like
get
you have to
stuck.
like go into a situation and like accept that you're just going to be gross and accept that there's going to be like a baseline amount of like bugs all over your body and in your body. Um, and it's not great, but you have to like sort of just accept it as your reality. Just like uh, I don't know, like I accepted a different reality when I was living in the Peace Corps in Nicaragua in the little concrete hut, for example.
Well, I mean, you spent 2 years as a volunteer at the Peace Corps. What
Yeah,
compelled you to do that, and what was your experience like?
in the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
It was good. I was in Nicaragua. I was an environmental education volunteer. Um, I got assigned one of the smallest sites in Nicaragua. So how the Peace Corps works, you do 2 months of like language, cultural training, and then they split you up into, they send you out into your own little town to be alone, essentially, usually. And, but after the 2 months, when they gave us our locations, they gave me mine and they were like, I'm sorry. I was like, why? Why are you apologizing? And they were like, well, it's a rough place, but we thought you were the one person that could handle it. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that, whether to thank you, be complimented, or or not.
I think
But
that's a
it was
compliment.
very small. It was a compliment, but it was a rough location. I don't regret it. It was this like sort of dusty rest stop on the Pan American Highway. Um, but I loved it. I did the Peace Corps because I wanted more like for my personal self anyway. I wanted more of like a genuine cultural experience. You know, I didn't want to, I'd like traveled places, but you know, you just travel places, you get a little taste of things. Often it's like curated for you. I wanted to really like be a part of a different culture and speak a different language. And I was in this tiny little town called Puertas Viejas, Nicaragua. It's like, look it up. There's like nothing there. Um, I was like part of the town government. I was really close to other people, still am. I taught science. Basically, I taught everything in three different schools, two of which were multi-grade, preschool to sixth grade, all in one class, all in one room. And you had to teach them all at the same time, different lessons, which is, I'm not going to say we persevered and did it. It was impossible. We did our best. But I don't know. I think I had an impact at the same time, and I really ended up like loving those kids and the teachers I worked with and the community. Relatively nice for the area. It's like a little tiny like prefab concrete thing. $17 a month in rent. Yeah,
I mean, I can kind of
that's
relate to that because in my business, I spent about 5 or 6 years traveling the world, going to third world countries, middle of nowhere. There were several times I thought that I was going to be kidnapped, that I was
yeah,
going to be
that'll happen.
murdered, or someone was going to harvest my organs. I've been in those situations frequently, especially when starting this business. So I know what you're saying when you're saying that it's like you go if you go to like the touristy places and countries, you don't get to experience the country as it
Yeah.
really is. So I get what you're saying there, and also that like adventure spirit in you makes sense that you went and you did what you did there at the beach. But I feel like it's also something that was a lot more popular a long time ago, and I feel like a lot of people are not volunteering for that anymore. Is that kind of true?
Uh,
It's more rare.
People still are. Yeah, it was like it. I feel like it was more talked about a while ago, but a lot of people still do it. You know, it's mostly kids out of college. Not all, but the majority of people that do the Peace Corps are like kids out of college. Um, you have to just go into it with the right perspective. You know, a lot of people like go into it thinking they're gonna like completely change the world and blah blah blah, and they're gonna go and like I don't know. You have to like really. They teach it the right way. I will say, I'll defend the Peace Corps in this. They teach it the right way. When you go into these communities, you can't just like go and like start preaching at them and like giving stuff. You have to go and like sit and I encourage you to do so. Like sit and understand the community, like talk to the locals, see what they need, and really understand their culture and their point of view, which could be very different than the Western point of view, and where they're coming from, and like see how you can bridge those gaps effectively um to do whatever you're trying to do, whether it be like health and wellness or teaching science or conservation like I was or anything like that. And the Peace Corps too, it doesn't like they don't go out and just give stuff. They really try to push against. I think there was some of this in the past historically with the Peace Corps, like the white savior type of thing, but I think they push against that. You don't go out and like give the community stuff. Just like start doing things. If you want to build a playground, for example, like I did, or do anything, you have to have a counterpart in the community that does it with you, that like understands the process of like, or learns the process of like networking with these other groups, these NGOs and fundraising and stuff like that. So they learn the skills that they can, you know, keep and maintain in their community and their lives in the country. So
So
I don't
I
know.
guess
It was
the kind
nice.
of
I wish I had done it again as a little later in life, but it was
so I
good.
guess the weird kind of thing there is contributing to the society, but not pushing an agenda or not pushing a narrative on people.
Yeah, well said. Perfect. Yeah.
Since 2017, you've been a marine biologist at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. My background's in marine biology, but my title is just field biologist.
so what pursued what pushed you to pursue that as a career, and what is that like? What do you because if you see on your social media, you're like obviously doing so many cool things and experiencing so many cool things. Is that part of why you became a marine biologist?
Yeah, actually. It's funny. I grew up in upstate New York, very far from the ocean. I only seen the ocean a couple times. Yeah, I grew up there far from the ocean, and I did really well in art at the end of high school. Everyone thought I was going to go to art school, and then at the last minute, I was like, I'm going to go be a marine biologist, and that's what I did. I don't know. I've always been very into um science and nature. Um, I don't know, not to get into religion and everything. I'm not very religious at all, but like when I'm out in nature and immersed in it and see the like vast complexity of life, like it gives me, I don't know, like a very spiritual sense. Like it's absolutely amazing. I sort of believe in like the vast randomness of the universe, but it's which sounds cold, but to me, like when I'm in nature and I see like all that evolved and formed from nothing, it's like again, it gives me that like sort of spiritual feeling like this is absolutely amazing and deserves to be appreciated and respected. And yeah, that's kind of why I got into conservation biology and biology in general. But I've always loved the water as well, so marine biology was an obvious choice. My
Well,
job now sort of focuses on. I work for the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. I know that's a mouthful. It's in the north. It encompasses the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. It's the second largest marine reserve in the world. But I work with everything. I work with the seabirds and all the endemic plants and animals and invertebrates and the marine life as well, the seals and turtles and corals and fish and everything.
well, it's
Beautiful.
interesting that you started bringing up spiritualism because my next question that I have for you is that it's obvious that you have a deep love for nature and wildlife. But yet, does having to kill and eat animals ever bother you? Do you feel a spiritual connection with animals you hunt? And what is the mental and emotional process of hunting, making the kill, cleaning it, and then ultimately eating it? Is there a spiritual process there for you?
Good question. Um, it is hard hunting. It should always be a little bit hard. Um, but I do believe, that humans evolved as omnivores. We did evolve to eat animals. And if I'm going to make the choice, I was vegetarian for a while for the most part. Well, I wasn't vegetarian. There's not really a word for it. I just did not eat anything that I thought could be factory farmed. So I'd still eat things that were like hunted or fished or things like that. But anything that could potentially be factory farmed, I did not. Because that's what I see is very unnatural. Like
It's
factory
horrific.
farming and some of the horrors that come along with that are pretty terrible. But you know, we're we evolved to eat animals. And if I'm going to engage in that, if I'm going to eat animals, I want to
Do the deed
sort of go
yourself.
through the spiritual process, like you said, of harvesting them myself, which especially when I started was difficult because I do have like a deep love for nature, but a lot of emotion goes into all of my kills, especially the larger ones. I think every like larger kill I've had, I've cried a little bit, and
Yeah, I
I'm
kind of
not
picked
ashamed to
up
say that.
on that a little bit from you, which is like again, I think that it's one of the things I've always said this because I was a vegetarian for 15 years, and
Oh,
people would ask me why are you a vegetarian, and I would say, the thing is that if you brought me the chicken and told me, hey, you want to eat this chicken, you have to kill it. I wouldn't be able to kill it myself, so I always felt that I didn't deserve to eat the animal because I wasn't
yeah,
willing to do the deed myself. That makes any
yeah,
sense?
that's how I felt. Exactly, that's how I felt as well. I was like, if I'm going to eat meat, I don't deserve to do it if I'm just going to, buy chicken nuggets from the store. I need
Right.
to be able to, um, not that I can't do that, but I need to also be able to harvest it myself and understand that process and sort of like face that reality a little bit. But I do feel that, hunting and fishing and harvesting your own meat like that is extremely ethical. I have so much respect for it. Um, anyone who does that, I mean, like I said, it's eons better than factory farming and there's other, sort of quote unquote artificial ways of sourcing meat. But yeah, when I was a little kid, I used to think, a very little kid, I used to think like hunters were like the Antichrist. I think it was like terrible, the worst thing you could ever do. Meanwhile, I'm like sitting on my couch eating hot dogs with ranch dressing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
When I grew up and like started processing a little bit more, like I did a full 180. Like, I couldn't have more respect for people
I
that
think
are
there's a
able to do
huge
that.
disconnect where people are eating packaged food, like you said, processed meats coming from farms, and it's so out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
The whole process, and I think that there should be a huge amount of respect for people who are able to, especially like you did, or like natural hunters who are going out and doing primitive hunting and catching, like literally that you can see if anybody watches your episodes, you literally are kind of crazy, dude. You grab freaking snakes. Like I've seen you grab several snakes, like literally just grab them, which is funny because I had a thing about that, which I'll get to later. But there's got to be such a deeper understanding from going through things like that and hunting with your hands, primitive hunting, having to clean the animal out in the wild, then having to preserve it. I'm sure the respect for the animal and the meat is like so much higher because it's all you have.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And when you're using these primitive means of hunting and like running around grabbing things with your hands and stuff, like you said, I mean, it's much more difficult. It really evens the playing field. But, um, yeah, it makes you, like you just said, it gives you so much more respect for, the animals. And you're not only that, you're so much more in tune with their behaviors and their movements and all of that because you have to be in order to sort of get down to their level and have success in harvesting any type of that meat. Especially in Africa and South Africa. I mean, the last challenge, especially that I did, we were in the cradle of humanity. That's where humans evolved. Um, there's a theory, a, a fairly popular theory about human movement throughout the world that humans evolved in Africa. We evolved sort of in unison with all these large land mammals, and they evolved defenses against us. They're very very in tune to anything that's abnormal, little smells, just what you look like, all of that, and are very receptive to that and can evade you very, very effectively. But as humans evolved out of Africa and as humans moved out of Africa, I should say, and migrated around the world, it sort of unfortunately coincides very well with the extinction of a lot of large land mammals and other large land animals like large geese and birds and stuff like that. When you're in Africa and you're sort of just in unison with these species that humans evolved with, it's a very like interesting spiritual experience, like you said.
Do you feel that people get sick from eating all of the processed food? Since we're on that topic, because on Naked and Afraid, you really get to see that people are eating 100% natural. You're boiling your water, you're filtering your water, which most likely is better than the tap water coming out of our sinks, right? Even if you're
Yeah.
boiling water, even better than potentially bottled water in some cases. You're technically week-long fasting or water fasting for days on end. And you see some people falling apart from that process, but you also see other people looking healthier. And I don't know if I'm just in a disillusioned place of that. I mean, although you're getting emaciated, the beginning of it, before you go past that boundary of becoming emaciated, you really see like no one really gets sick on the show. Anyone
Yeah.
getting sick on the show is getting sick because they ate something bad or they did something stupid, right? No one's just getting like a cold. Or at least you never see that.
Yeah, it's true. I wouldn't I wouldn't go as far as to say the water's better than bottled water anyway. Often we're boiling like, oh God, in the Amazon we had to like wade in the mud and we're just drinking like boiled Amazon mud water. Or in Africa we had like one little water source that we were all like bathing and washing our nasty bodies in, and animals were pooping in and we were drinking out of at the same
That's
time.
that's
But
another
but
level.
you are, to your point though, you are extremely conscious about what you're eating and what you're drinking, way more than you normally are. Because you do take that water, even though there's some nasty stuff in that water, you don't get sick from it still. You take it and you boil it for a long time, and you're very conscious of making sure it's boiled properly. Um, and if someone doesn't boil it properly, everyone around them gets angry and corrects it immediately, which is rare. Um, and same with the food. You overcook everything. So you're worried about parasites. You're just very conscious. So you're right. You do rarely get sick out there, from that kind of stuff. The comes to mind is in the Amazon season. Given we weren't eating much, but conscious about what we were eating, we weren't getting sick. But the crew, on the other hand, had to stay at this little eco lodge nearby, and they were just getting what the eco lodge was feeding them, and they weren't really like cooking the food well. The production crew kept getting like stomach bugs and foodborne illnesses and stuff like that, and they were like dropping out all over the place, and we were just laughing because we were fine. Um, but you're right, you eat so much more cleanly. You're not eating any processed things or anything like that. Um,
Or
so
overeating.
it does like, what's that?
Or overeating, right? I mean,
Yeah,
you're under eating, but like I think one of the problems we have is that we tend to overeat, and I don't think our bodies are really built for the amount of food that the average person puts in it on a day, especially processed food. So I guess my question
yeah.
was especially for you, I've seen episode where you I think didn't eat for like 14, maybe it was like 12 or 14 days or something, or they don't show it if you are eating, they're not showing that on the show. But are you filling in the gaps there? Are you like finding like insects or bugs or like little like mushrooms or foraging and filling in gaps and they just don't show that? Or are you literally just not eating straight for like 7 days at a time?
Both. Depends on the situation. Often you're just not eating.
What was
Um,
the longest you went without eating?
oh, hard to say. Probably like 14 days without eating completely. But often, yeah, you're finding like a couple of bugs, or maybe a little bit of fruit or something like that. And they have to like edit it down for an episode so you don't see those things that are sometimes, less exciting. But they show the major things. But often, when you eat like a little bit, it's just, yeah, it's just not much in the grand scheme of things. It's not like a meal.
Well, you
Like
definitely see the
it'll
bounce
be like
back.
two tiny fruit the size of ping pong balls or something like that, and that's what you have for the day or something like that. It's not really. I wouldn't count
Those,
it as eating.
those little meals, those tiny meals that you wind up getting and eating, do they actually really bounce you back like you hear people say?
Oh, they do. It's totally true. We're not exaggerating when we're like take a little bite of something and we're like, I feel it.
Yeah.
I don't. Maybe it's more of a mental thing. I don't know, but just like being able to like chew on something or have it in your mouth and swallow it, even if it's like I get like I was just saying, in the grand scheme of things, it's really not providing you like much nutrition at all. It's like tiny, but but even that just like feels great.
When you did your fan challenge, number one, I've watched all the show, and you really didn't seem like a fan to me. You did seem to have way more experience than a lot of other people I had seen on the show up to that point. I mean, even to the fact that you didn't give up on building your fire. And then anyway, Holly's there, and she doesn't want to cuddle. Right? There was like that little
Yeah.
thing where eventually she subsides. She's like, okay, fine, it's freezing. But how long did you spend trying to get that fire going? And how did you not like at some point like when do you give up on something like that? Because it seemed like you were there trying to start that fire for a long time. And I know we're going back a long time in history here, but like it did seem
Yeah.
like you spent a lot of time trying to get that fire going, and your persistence and not giving up and making that happen for not just you but for Holly as well, your teammate. Like what was the thought process there? Like, and when is it time to give up?
I mean, it's a hard calculation because like giving up in that sense doesn't mean the same thing as like giving up in that situation and starting that fire isn't the same as like giving up if you were like outside of your house practicing. You know what I mean? There's a lot more at stake. When is it time to give up? Uh, you have to just like constantly be weighing your needs against the situation, right? Um,
You
in
needed
that
that
sense, if
fire.
I gave up, yeah, if I didn't get fire, we could have gotten hypothermia during the night. We didn't know exactly how cold it got, but it was already cold. It was in like the low 60s, I think, at that point, when we got the fire, and that was, like just after sunset. Um, but it got a lot colder. It got freezing at night, and you get hypothermia. So you have to just like sort of like constantly balance your needs. If you know you're exhausting yourself, if you see that, you just don't have the right materials, or if it's not dry enough and you need the sun to dry your tinder or something like that, and you have a way to sort of get through the night without getting hypothermia, then like maybe you could make that call. But sometimes you just need to like keep going at it. You need to make sure that you're not injuring yourself or burning yourself out. But
Were you
I don't
going
know. There's a
for
lot
that
of like
fire
weird
for
tough
that long?
calculations. Like few hours, I think, a couple hours. Yeah.
And once
It
the fire
wasn't too
started,
long, but it took a while, probably
and
longer than it should
once
have.
you got it going, was that like a huge moment for you?
Oh yeah, that was my like first success out there. Um, and I'm not gonna lie, the TV stuff, I've gotten over it, but especially on like that first challenge that I did, the second one a little bit, like the cameras and stuff in your face, it's like a totally new thing. Um, and it is like it can like make you a little nervous. Most people it does. And that like everything that you do can be broadcast and shown on TV to the world, and people are going to judge you by it for the rest of your life. Um, and that's exactly what it is. But like every success is shown, yes, but also every mistake. So everything you're doing, especially in the beginning, again, I'm like thinking to myself, oh God, if like I'm not getting this, I'm like making this mistake or something like that. Like it's just gonna follow me for the rest of my life. And it's like a little bit of a thing. So there's like that in the back of your head too. I don't know. I got over it eventually.
Yeah. You mentioned you were talking about and nothing about it is sexual. But I think one of the questions that probably a lot of people have is and we can see that on your episode here with Holly, where she's talking about, hey, my boyfriend, I don't want to get him
Oh yeah.
jealous or upset. You explain that you have a husband, so there's really no jealousy to be had here. And I think that's one of the things that eventually allows her to decide to cuddle, because she does bring that up and mention that. But do people ever get intimate on that show? I mean, you're both naked. You're so vulnerable. You're out in the middle of nowhere naked. I mean, it's got to happen.
I've I've heard that it has once or twice in like the very beginning. I don't know, maybe. But honestly, when you're out there, survival mode is a real thing, for your body. It's a real like physical state. Your body just changes. Your sex drive for men, in my experience, almost immediately after a couple days at least, just like completely goes away. You have absolutely zero like sex drive or desire, and it's part of like your body going into like survival mode and making you focus on other things. Um, Women always have their periods within like the first few days, and
That's got to be
then
so
often
rough.
not again. Um, Yeah, so it's rough.
They don't have
It's
any
rough, but
feminine
you're
products.
no, not really. It is rough. But yeah, you lose all your sexual desire. Your body like totally makes that happen, and you're just on top of that, you're disgusting. You're starving. Sex is not on your mind. You're covered in like dirt, and there's probably ticks in your ass. It's not cute.
That
Um,
that's crazy.
but again, like real, like you're all of that desire just sort of shuts off
Yeah,
pretty quickly anyway.
that's really crazy. But you know, one of the things that I would mention about Holly was that she did in the beginning of that episode. She starts saying like how people are dumb because they cut themselves, and she obviously cuts herself, right? And
Yeah.
she gets the stitches raw out there. She wow, that was really impressive. She took the stitches. She got an infection in the stitches, and then she finished with you. I mean, was you finishing that episode like just as satisfying as her finishing with you? That was your first challenge and you finished.
Oh yeah.
Was her finishing with you like really also substantial for you? Not just that you finished, but she finished with you, especially after the stitches and
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she went through so much. We all go through so much on these challenges. It's trauma bonding to the nth degree. Because you're out there with this person, you're like naked, smashed against them. You're like going through one of the biggest challenge of your life. You don't have any distractions or phones or anything like that, and you're with that person 24/7. And you get to know them really deeply, and you really bond. And I did with Holly. I love Holly so much. You have to go through some like extremely tough mental states and pull each other out of it, and it brings you together. And Holly and I definitely did that for each other. The cuddling thing was hilarious. He was worried about that, but
yeah, she seemed very
she
worried
came
about
she came around pretty quick. Holly's great, and her boyfriend is great too.
it.
But yeah, to finish together was huge. It always is. When you're out on these challenges, you can get really close with people, and you try to keep them in the game as much as possible when they have to leave. Sometimes it's necessary, but it's always really hard and really emotional to see people go. Sometimes I think I see comments online like that we're like being too emotional or we're like crying when people go and stuff like that. But it's I don't know, all of your emotions are heightened out there. You're much more sensitive to those things, and the bonds you create, even if it's just a couple weeks, become like very, very deep. So
Do you think you could have made 21 days instead of the 14?
yeah, I think so.
They don't give you that
It was a
option.
it was a good intro. It was a good little pace, but no, we didn't have the option.
Yeah,
We could have done 21 though.
so then
There wasn't
next,
much food in that location, but we were living.
yeah, it didn't seem like you were eating much there. But next was season 12, episode 4. You're out in the desert in Mexico with Megan. Uh,
Yes.
right off the bat, you catch a Western coach whip with your bare hands, and ironically enough, you whip it to death. You whip to death the coach whip, but you grab the thing with your hand, like that. For me, that's one of the crazier things. I don't think people can really wrap it around their heads that why would you grab the snake with your bare hand like that? Is it just an instinctual thing, or do you know that actually the snakes are not as dangerous as people make them out to be?
A little bit of both. It was definitely just an instinctual thing. I saw it and did it. I've spent a lot of time in the outdoors, and I don't know. Honestly, one of the biggest things that benefits me out there is like leaning into my like sticky little kid from back in the day, just like running around in the swamps in upstate New York and just like touching things. But I've handled plenty of snakes and stuff in my job, and back when I was a kid, like I said. And when you're out there, you have to remember, you're not trying to like keep the snake as a pet. You're not trying to like take it and hold it and handle it.
You need
You're
to eat
trying
it.
to just like kill this thing so you can eat it. And I know if you whip a snake around, it doesn't have the strength to come back and bite you against that momentum of whipping it around in a circle.
Right. It gets
Um,
disoriented.
so I just grabbed it and started whipping it so it couldn't come back and bite me, but I was trying to like whip it against something. But it made for a really good scene. Ended up like whipping it around that log, I think, and like
Yeah,
smashed
yeah.
his head. But
It's the first time we really get introduced to, I think, to somebody like, I mean, Megan was getting eaten alive. She and even vocalizing. Megan was your partner, vocalizing
Yeah.
that there were literally ants in her vagina, which was like I can't even begin to imagine what that is. And there's a scene where it's the middle of the night and she's up crying and screaming about it, and you're just like passed out, like cuddling with the ants. You know what I mean? It was so funny. She's up screaming, and you're just like you're like dead to the world, like ants, like you're like, hi. What was
Yeah,
up?
that was a pretty good dichotomy there. Uh, she was she was going through a lot mentally too that I'm not going to get into, but yeah, the bugs were getting her a lot worse. But I I tried to help her like constantly throughout the day. I'd bring her, like dung and things that she could use to create smoke and get some of the gnats off her and that kind of thing. But um, I think I think she was just kind of like mentally checked out, to be honest. And that was sort of like, um, every little thing, every little bug became like a big deal because she was sort of mentally not in it.
Right.
Um, yeah, unfortunately, you got those scenes and stuff because she was, not to bring her down. I mean, it was a brutal situation, but like she was sort of freaking out about the bugs every waking hour. So at some point, I needed to also.
Yeah, yeah. But it was hilarious. What a great
But of
scene.
course, they showed that scene where she's screaming and I'm sleeping next to her.
But are you
Uh,
experiencing the same thing? Because I know that there's like an I forget what I think there's an acid. Some people like lactic acid. Uh,
yeah.
the higher your lactic acid content, I think the more you're prone to getting bug bites.
Yeah, that's definitely thing. Some people are much more prone to mosquitoes and all that, with their blood type and a couple different things. They were they were on me. There were bugs on me. You sort of just have to ignore it. I mean, the bugs that were out there are maybe, and I'm not exaggerating, maybe like a two, if you're doing fractions, a 200th of the amount of bugs that were out in the Amazon. In the Amazon, we were just covered all the time, all the time, day and night. There were bugs completely all over us. In the desert, there was maybe, I don't know, a couple at a time, um, which a couple at a time can be enough to drive many people crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Do
she
you, do
wasn't
you,
she wasn't too into it.
do you at some point just like you were just like over it? Like you just stopped combating it and you just let it be?
You have to a certain extent.
'Cause it seems
I don't
like
know.
that's one of the hardest things to overcome.
I don't want to say you stop combating it because you're always combating it and it just drives you mentally nuts. But you have to do your best to make yourself not go crazy from it.
Yeah. But Megan eventually taps 4 days in, leaving you alone. So, well, how do you handle that? Was it really that much more difficult to be alone, especially that early on? I mean, 4 days in, you're already being left. You're on your own.
I mean, it was tough. The one thing I said going into that second challenge was that, like, when they asked me what I was worried about being alone. Um, I was confident in enough anyway, and like the research I'd done in the area and my ability to like provide myself with shelter and with the things that I needed. But the mental spaces you can get into out there are, something that I didn't really have much experience with. I knew how dark you can get in your mind. How it just feels like you're dying. You feel like you're dying, literally, all the time. And to not have someone else out there with you to sort of like bring you out of that space and distract you and talk you out of it and help you do things as well, uh was really scary for me going into the second challenge. It's like, if I have to do this alone, I'm just gonna be sitting there with my own thoughts, and I could get into a downward spiral. I didn't know how I was gonna react to that. I don't know. Megan had a hard time out there in the beginning, and I was trying to help her a lot, and she was very upset about the bugs. Um, so I don't know, when she left, I didn't have that. I could focus more on survival and stuff. And it was a very nice location, I'll say. It was extremely, extremely arid in the Chihuahuan Desert in the Texas-Mexico border. Um, but even the cactuses were wilting. But there was some cactus fruit out there, and I made myself a nice shelter in the shade, a little hut, and there was a little spring nearby. I don't know if they showed that, but there's a little spring where I was getting my water that I made a little well out of, and it was crystal clear and ice cold. So I had myself like well set up. I kind of enjoyed it being alone. I didn't expect to, but I kind of enjoyed it. It was a real challenge. Again, it was like my biggest fear going into that challenge, and then I was able to sort of overcome it and understand myself better through it and my abilities. I wouldn't choose it. I'm definitely an extrovert. I, get energy from people being around me. And, you go through the craziest experiences, like I said, like you have the wildest experiences of your life, stories that you can tell for the rest of your life. And to not have someone else out there with you sharing in that experience, I think is like a big loss.
One of the greatest challenges on the show seems like getting along with each other. Have you ever butt heads with other contestants, and how do you manage that? What bothers you most about people when surviving naked with them?
Ooh, good
What really,
question.
what really gets under
Um,
your skin?
the ways you interact with people are also so different than your regular life. And they have to be your reactions to people, all of that. You're with people that are so far outside of your bubble. It's not even funny, at least for me. I'm definitely not the typical survivalist. I'm like more, leftist. I'm gay. I'm like from a different bubble than many of these people. But
Yeah, but you're like
like
a
we were
freaking
saying before, you're
superhero,
out
dude.
there, you're surviving with them, you're like naked, and you end up bonding with these people really, really deeply. And you have to, for everyone's sake, you have to, communicate effectively and work effectively and try to, whatever the gaps are in, your ideas, your perspectives, or your thoughts, whether that be even like politically speaking or anything, you have to like sort of meet on an even territory of respect and like talk through them and yeah, just have a mutual understanding that you respect each other, can work with each other. Talking through things with the person you're having trouble with don't necessarily work because in traditional normal life, real life, you can sort of like talk through those things and give it space and escape that person and like even if they have a bad reaction, you can like let them have a bad reaction and like stew it
Right.
over and then come back to it later. But out there, you're with that person 24/7. You have to work with that person 24/7, especially on the last one standing ones. You have to like communicate effectively as a team. So sometimes if like depending on the personality, if you like confront someone about something that you're having a difficult time with, if you know they're gonna have a bad reaction and it's gonna like create a big rift, like sometimes that's not the right choice. And like sometimes I've had to try to just like shove things down and forget about it. There's a lot of things going on with like Trish in the last season, and I definitely did that. I think, I will be honest, I think I like shoved a lot of my irritation down and then it like bubbled out in weird moments, which didn't help. But
Like, I think more of my question is, like, for example, someone doesn't really take their turns and go boil water, or
yeah,
like, are there little things that, because when you're out there, you must be so hypersensitive that you're seeing all the minutia, all the little details
totally,
become so
totally.
magnified. And like
Yeah,
when you're watching and observing, it must be so easy for people to get on your nerves because you're so hypersensitive. And it's like you didn't.
totally.
I
Yeah,
collected yesterday, and again, you're the type of person that's not boasting about your accomplishments and your end providing. But then you have other people who go out and one day they collect firewood. You've been doing it for 10 days. Then the guy goes, he collects firewood one day, comes back, and he wants to talk about it all day long. Like that must be like,
yes.
this is what I'm kind of talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If you have someone that's out there and they're like not that skilled, but they're trying their best and they're out there like trying and putting an effort and doing things, like that's great. But yeah, what really gets under my nerves, you hit it on the head, is when someone's like not doing much. And not only not doing much, you can not do much and be like, I'm sorry, I'm just like really tired or something like that. But if you like are not doing much and then you do like one little thing and you're boasting about it a lot, that can cause a lot of irritation. It's a hard calculation. Sometimes like you're out there, like I said, you're out there and you like have to maintain these good working relationships and you have to make those calculations. Is it should I just like shove this down and ignore it and we'll just, go with it? Or is it better to like address it head on?
Yeah.
And it depends on the person and what you imagine their reaction would be and the situation, obviously. But Yeah, like I said, sometimes you just have to make different calculations out there, but it can really, you're absolutely right. You're hypersensitive to those things. And if someone's not doing their part, you can tell pretty quickly.
Why I was kind of referencing that is that you see Gary, right? Gary's my favorite person on Naked and Afraid. The personality, watching him is just endlessly entertaining. There's nothing not entertaining about that guy. And Gary's like so entertaining, but you really saw a lot of this, what I'm talking about right now with him. And I was wondering, like, he went and I don't know if like, obviously, do you remember? Like, he found the fishing hole, the major fishing hole, and then expected everyone to give him all the fish from the fishing hole or
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z, and these little things. And you could see him getting very frustrated and very agitated about all of it. And I'm wondering because he's an animal, but what was that like? Because you really handled that well. A lot of people didn't handle that situation. I mean, again, this is what they show us on the show, but it really seemed like you did your best, like you said, to swallow many, many times, many things, even very aggressive moments in your direction. And I really thought you handled that like so well.
Oh,
What was the deal with that?
I tried. Gary's the one person that pushes me to my limits. um, yeah. I mean, like Gary does uh Gary does contribute out there. He doesn't just like he's not like I was saying, he's not a person that just, sits on his behind and like does nothing and then contributes one thing and boasts about it like crazy. But he does like, yeah, exactly like you said, he'll like boast about little things and demand uh accolades, he'll demand appreciation from everyone. And if you don't shower him with compliments, then he goes nuts on you and just nuts. He will completely unleash himself.
But
And
Dan,
it's
do you think
very,
he was
very
right?
difficult
Do you think he was
about the
right
fishing
about the
hole.
watering hole, like in that people should give him fit? Were you because the thing
No,
is for me,
absolutely not.
if I was there on the other side of it, I would have said, "Hey, listen, you exposed this early, but who's to say I wasn't going to find this watering hole myself in an hour?"
We He did that specifically so he could like get us to give him accolades. So he was trying to it was a manipulation tactic. We already knew that watering hole was there. We were planning to go to it the next day. Um, he didn't have any like fishing elements or hunting tools or anything like that. So he knew we were already going to go the next morning, and he ran out the night before and went to it, and then found it, and then came to all of our camps and told us he found it and demanded like thanks and appreciation from us. He came to our camp and he was angry before we even stepped out of our camp. Like he we didn't say
You're
thank
already
you fast
aggressive.
enough. He was already aggressive and like on edge and started getting angry at us. And we were like Trish and I were looking at each other and we're like, what is going on? Like he's just like so aggro. Um, but yeah, he was like already yelling at us on the way because we weren't saying thank you enough. And again, he knew we were going to find it the next morning. He just did this as a manipulation tactic. He wanted praise from us, and he wanted us to like give him a whole bunch of food that we got out of this pond because he found it. But it was completely just a manipulation technique. And when someone's like demanding praise like that, just absolutely demanding it for unreasonable reasons, it makes me want to give it even less. So I didn't buy into it. Sometimes you just have like I just try to keep my mouth shut around Gary. Other people will get him to like stop talking by like praising him and telling him all these good things. I can't do that. Matt and Steven are really good at that. Like I can't do that. I refuse. So I
You're not
just
going
like
to give
walk
someone
away and
something
stay
for free.
silent. But he goes back and forth on loving me and like and then screaming at me and saying all kinds of terrible things at me because I won't shower him with praise all the time.
This is in correlation to Jeff too, right? Which who you
Yeah,
visit,
it came to mind.
right? Who obviously has is the thing is that it's like it's great that you did this, but I think that for the like you watch a character like Jeff, and what can really bother it's fun for us on the side watching it, but for you guys who are sitting there having to listen to somebody scream and holler and voice their successes when you might have had a rough day, or that could really like drive someone like like to the point where it's like I think it's time to fight. Uh,
Yeah. The reputation you have does like have a lot to do with how you act out there and how you play to your successes and that kind of thing. I mean, Jeff is great at that. Jeff for all his faults, not my favorite person, but for all his faults, he's like very, very, very good at the camera, and he makes good TV. You're right. When he like reacts to like a small success, especially on like the last one standing, he started to like use that as a tool to sort of like beat other people down. Um, and it was effective. Or like you said, when you're like having a rough day, if you're starving, you haven't been eating for like a week, and like someone walks into camp with like a whole bunch of meat, just like screaming about how excited they are to eat it all. Uh, that can be pretty rough. Um,
Yeah,
but it also like makes good TV, and it helps your reputation. So I don't know. I think a lot of people
I,
have like
I think.
reputations that result from like their like reactions, and they're like boasting about their accomplishments and stuff like that. Well, other people sort of just
Well, I
I don't
mean,
know,
look, it's
accept them and move
obvious.
along.
It's obvious to all of us who are watching, especially season two, that you were definitely everyone was very edgy about Jeff in general, but eventually you do get paired with Jeff, and the two of you together were like holy shit, I don't know, that's the way they showed it on the show was that the two of you together were like
Yeah.
killing it, not like any other pair of people that I have ever seen on the show. Uh, did that change your opinion about him to some degree? And don't you think he was just literally playing the game? Like that was his comment, right? I'm just here to
Oh
play.
yeah.
Or do you think he's like genuinely just like because then you can see also on the XL challenges he's still doing the same thing.
Yeah. It didn't change my opinion of him. It in any degree it almost made it worse, to be honest. Um it's on the first season of Last One Standing, my first time surviving with Jeff. Jeff was a psychopath. Like he really was. Like all 11 of us were just like horrified by this guy and his actions, and he just wasn't like he didn't make any sense. He was like hoarding things for no reason that he didn't need. Yes, it's a game, but it's also like real life where we're like real people out there in the elements. He's like keeping a hide from a girl who like almost had hypothermia, and like was constantly bragging about how he was calling us communists, and he like was saying he would like never give us food. Um, if he found anything, he wouldn't, and he like would take too much of his share of like that first what was it, Impala or something that was
Yeah,
found on the first day. He like took way too much of that, and like gave out scraps when he was supposed to be dividing it evenly. Like he made it very clear like how he was playing the game, and it was in a very like nasty way. And we tried to reason with him and say like, hey, well, like we can't like keep sharing food and resources and stuff with you if you're like just going to be like taking and not giving and blah blah blah. And then he just like started calling us bullies for that. Like it didn't make any sense. He was like mentally all over the place and a very unpleasant person. And then in this second season, he was genuinely like enjoyable to be around, a hard worker. Like he was still playing the game and he would still admit it, but he was like a good person to be around. He was a good teammate. He was a completely different person. And it made me trust him even less. Because I've seen people out there like Gary, for example. Not many people do, but some people will play up for the camera a little bit, but you'll still get to know who they are really as a person deep down, like you do everyone, like I've been saying. But with Jeff, no, I've spent like many times with him, I've been in camp. Like I don't know who he is deep down. He's shown two different people 24/7 on these two challenges, which is impossible for anyone else to do. And even though like I enjoyed, I would even like see him sitting somewhere and like go over and talk to him. Like I enjoyed being around with him. I saw him after the challenge too, but he was just a totally different person. So it made my I worked with it. We worked great together. We really did. Like you said, like we accomplished a lot. And
getting the net
I'm
out
not
of the
gonna like shoot
tree.
myself in the foot by like being angry at Jeff the whole time because I could use it to my advantage. But yeah, we worked great. We got that net out of the tree. We were like naked on top of each other on a tree full of thorns, trying to get that thing out.
That
And
was crazy.
I told Jeff to his face, though. I told the camera, I told Jeff to his face. I was like, I trust you even less. I don't know who the hell you are, but this is working, so let's go
Yeah.
with it.
No, it was very enjoyable for us to watch the two of
Yeah, it was
you.
really interesting. It
It,
was
it was very
interesting. That's for sure.
enjoyable. And you know, kind of just to get to the end of this, you know, I thought Kai was brilliant. Uh,
Ah, yes, yes.
I thought Kai was absolutely brilliant, and while I'm happy you won, definitely, honestly, I think a lot of people were really rooting for her. Uh,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I don't know if you were kind of on some level subconsciously also rooting for her, or would have been happy for her to win. Uh, she
Yeah.
was so close, man. She was so close. Um, were you in that headspace, or were you just like, I need to win, and that was it? Were you like laser
Oh, both. I
focused?
mean, I would have been ecstatic if Kai won or Fernando. I love him too, but like Kai is amazing. I mean, you saw in the fire challenge before that on day, what was it, like 40 or 42, um, where he had to start friction fire. Like Kai got it, and I like stopped and like got up and I was like hugging her and congratulating her rather than like working on my own fire, which I wasn't even thinking about. But
Right, right, you
yeah, I
did.
was so excited for her. She's absolutely brilliant. She's just so like mature and even keeled and ridiculously skilled. Yeah, she's like should be a role model for many people. She's an absolutely brilliant person. And I would have been ecstatic if she won as well. I definitely was still in the headspace of like I have to win this. I'm not gonna like slow down for that reason. But
Especially because you
uh
ran up the
yeah,
last one. Was
yeah.
that hard? Was it hard being runner up to Waz?
Um yeah. I mean, to an extent, sure. I'm not gonna lie, this is gonna sound like crazy and unappreciative of the money, I guess. But like at that moment, especially on the first one, we like really didn't have any food. It was day what 45
Yeah.
and starving. And you know you're so close to the end of it, and you're so depleted and you're so exhausted, and you've been like fantasizing about like food and a shower and all of that so much, and you know it's coming, and you're almost like more excited about that. That's like more just because of like your body's like physical need, what it's doing to your
Right.
hormones in your mind. You're more excited for that and for food than for the $100,000. Which again, maybe that makes me sound unappreciative of it, but like
No, it makes total
you
sense.
really are. It's crazy. You're sitting there thinking like, why am I more
Money.
excited about a hamburger than like the thought of winning a
Yeah.
hundred thousand dollars? But you really are. So like in that moment, like
You
I
can't
was
beat
just like
money.
happy for Waz and like excited that it's over, blah blah blah. And of course, it still comes with some like um, I don't know, a little bit of disappointment that you're so close. You know what I mean? And there's a couple things you could have done differently, and it would have totally changed it. But
Well,
I don't know. You can't dwell on it. I'm still happy Waz won. He's a good guy, and if Kai won, it would have been exactly the same. She's
I,
absolutely brilliant.
I just want to comment and touch on it since I have you on the line here. Is that number one? I don't know. I mean, you're obviously a way better survivalist than people could begin to understand. But I don't think, and don't kill me if you think this is like a not the greatest thing I'm going to say. I don't think you were the best survivalist with the most experience. I think the
For
reason
sure.
that I think the reason that you won, or what you were so close to winning the first one, but the reason why you won the second one was because of your attitude and because of your fortitude and because I think you figured out how to mentally and psychologically move yourself. Is that kind of, am I accurate there a little bit? I think your attitude
Yeah,
moved the show.
I think that's accurate. I think it, yeah, and that's totally in survival. You know, skill is a part of it. Obviously, like we're talking just about skill, like Kai and Darren totally eclipse me. Um, but really, like what's so important about survival in general, and it underlies all of the challenges and stuff on these last one standings. But I don't know, you have to like look a little bit deeper to see it. But like the most important survival skills you have, even more important than like any of the traditional bushcraft or anything like that, is to be positive, like you've been saying, but resourceful and creative and have a calm and even mind and allow yourself to problem solve. If you're like resourceful and creative in your environment, um, you can accomplish a lot as long as you know like the physiology of survival, like what your body needs to survive. You can sometimes like walk into a completely foreign environment and look at all the plants and the animals and the materials around you and be like, okay, like I could build a shelter out of like this fallen tree in this way or something like that and find like a creative solution to solve your physiological need for, warmth and protection rather than like going into it with like a whole mindful of Boy Scout knowledge, and you're like, okay, I need to create like this TP in this exact way and cut these logs all this way, and that'll make me this. You sometimes you can like not have any of that knowledge. If you're just resourceful and understand your body's needs and creative, you can go into an environment and figure things out in some really effective ways. And a lot of these challenges, you had to do that. Like the axe challenge, other than Darren, no one had ever made an axe before. You just had to like look at the situation, look at the problem, and like come up with like a creative and effective solution. And
I
I
mean,
don't know, I was proud of my like axe, for example, in that challenge. And Darren made a lot of like really good primitive axes, but that's for like slower going. And I looked at the thing, I was like, okay, I just need to like bash this tree down
yeah.
quickly. I need to like come up with a solution. It's not like going to look like a primitive axe because we're just bashing one tree down and it doesn't need to last. So I came up with like a giant log with a giant thing on it and a back so the rock wouldn't fall off, and it worked really, really well.
Even where you cut
So you just have
yourself
to be
though,
like
Dan,
creative.
like you got a really good cut, right? You grabbed the
Oh yeah,
you grabbed that. Oh no, it was a hatchet, I think. I
yeah.
forget you grabbed the
It's
hatchet.
a Pulaski, yeah.
Yeah, and you got a pretty good cut. And even with that, you still like you never really reacted to that in this crazy way. And I think that the point that I'm trying to make here, and it's not just for us here as fans of you and the show, is that you won something that probably you technically shouldn't have won, but you did win because of your attitude and your ability to adjust and adapt and be positive and not fight when you didn't need to fight. And this is really what win. And this same thing for me goes in my life is that's what gets you to. You don't have to be the best. You just have to be the best in that moment, especially psychologically, mentally, and
Yeah.
emotionally. And kudos to you for doing that because that's really what, in my opinion, won you that show, and then also made you such a likable human being that you're an example for people. You really are. There's a lot of examples to learn from you on the show. And my last question is, if are we going to see you again doing the show? Like when they call you, are you up for doing more and more and more? I mean, you
Oh,
won.
I'll probably do more.
You won.
I
You
know, I know. It's only down for hill from here, right?
Yeah, I mean, you won. Wait, what else? What else is there for you to do there? I mean, maybe they do. Like I was thinking, like maybe you get a 60-day challenge. Like if you had to do a 60-day challenge right now, they called you up and they're like, Dan, 60-day challenge. You get to pick your partner. Who are you taking with you?
Ooh,
Yeah,
60 days.
you got to pick your partner.
Maybe Steven or Matt or Kai or
Yeah,
Chini. Oh my God, Chini. Yes, I picked Chini. She's fantastic. I think Chini in the first season of Last One Standing, like, just did not get to showcase her abilities to the extent that she should have. Like, she's absolutely brilliant and so hilarious. Love that girl. Um, and I really enjoyed being out there with Kayla Cummings too in the Amazon. Like her and I clicked right away, and we were just like laughing nonstop. It was absolutely terrible, and we just like couldn't breathe because we were laughing so hard every day. And I
that's
love
fun.
that kind of attitude. So I'd do another long challenge with her as well. A lot
You
of
got to pick
people.
one. You got to pick one, dude. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
I'm
I
about
gotta
to
pick
win.
one.
You got to pick.
Oh my God. Probably Kai. Kai. I'll pick Kai.
Is it would and would you make that choice based off of your relationship, like a personal relationship, or skills, or both?
All of the above.
Right.
Yeah. I'm factoring all of that into these decisions. Like, yeah, their attitude, their skills, work ethic, how enjoyable they are to be around. Yeah. All of those people I listed have those things. But
Dan, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for taking much more time than you said. I mean, really, I appreciate it. I'm such a dude. I'm a huge fan. Really, I learned so much from watching you on the show. Life-changing lessons from watching you. And I really implore everybody to go and watch Dan. Follow him on social media. Would you have anything else coming up that's going to be interesting or that we can tune into?
um not right now, but I often am teaching workshops and different retreats and stuff like that. So you can follow me on Instagram at Dan underscore
Underscore link.
link underscore survives.
Yeah.
And I'll be posting there.
Yeah.
But thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been
Oh,
really enjoyable.
yeah,
I hope
it's
we
my
can keep in
pleasure.
touch.
Again, please don't forget to send me a shipping address. I got a box of fossils I'm sending your way.
Yeah, for sure.